Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining. It's an honor to speak to you today. My name is Kim. I'm with the AIMMS marketing team and I will be your host for the upcoming hour. Today's webinar is about overcoming the 7 pitfalls of stalled IBP initiatives. Our expert panel will discuss how to tackle these obstacles and will outline what a sustainable IBP process looks like. Let's do a little housekeeping before we get started. Today's session will be around 60 minutes long. Your lines will be muted. And if you have any questions at any time, please type them into the question box in your control panel. I'll take note of them and I'll bring them up at various moments during the session. At the end of the webinar, a survey will be launched and we value any feedback you have for us. I'd also like to point out that this session is being recorded and you will receive a link to the recording with the slides in the coming days. Let's take a look what's on our agenda for today. We'll start with an introduction of our panel and the concept of IBP. Then we'll dive into the 7 pitfalls and how to overcome them. A summary will give you some key takeaways and we'll end the webinar with some exciting news that's coming up. All right, let's get started with the introduction. It's my pleasure to welcome and introduce today's panel. Joining us live from Germany, Birgit is an associate and a partner at Oliver Wight since 2013 and has more than 2 decades of experience in business transformation and change management. Good morning, Birgit. How are you today?
Good morning, I'm great. Thanks, Kim.
For our audience to get to know you a little bit better, what's the one thing they should know about you before we get started?
So I'm really passionate about the impact IBP has on people and processes within organizations, but I'm also excited about technology and would call me an early adopter. I'm impressed by the growing possibilities that are there. Now, as these are the subjects for today, when I get excited, it's good to know that I tend to talk faster, so slow me down if that is necessary.
Very good, thank you. I'll take that up. Let's turn to our other panel member from the UK. We have Brian with us. Brian, are you there?
I am, yes. Morning, Kim.
Great. Brian, you spent most of your career in supply chain operations, focusing on demand-driven operating models and transformational programs. And you joined AIMMS about 2 years ago, shaping supply chain planning applications that are part of the SC Navigator suite. What else energizes you and brings you excitement?
Yeah, I mean, technology really. So, a bit like Birgit, people and process are great, but throughout my career, the use of technology to really kind of bring alive a successful process is what really excites me, and I guess is what really attracted me to joining AIMMS and looking at the opportunities there from our platform and how that can be used to support processes.
Very good. All right, now without further ado, I think it's time to get started. Once more, if you have any comments or questions, reach me through the chat or the Q&A box. And for now, I will fade to the background and I will give the floor to Birgit.
Thanks, Kim. So this slide really is about what is integrated business planning and what is important. And I thought I'd just tell a little bit about my story. So in my time before joining Oliver Wight, I was working for Wrigley's. In my earlier days, I was running good old sales and operation planning process when things were kind of too late, and when people had to come, they knew something would be cut. But then did a few other leadership roles in the couple of years after, and was asked by the leadership team really to manage and lead that change from sales and operation planning into integrated business planning. Now, what it did for us was, on the one hand, connecting all the functions into a single process, then helped us really look further out into the future to really drive our destiny. And what we did there is revisit our portfolio offering. We aligned our route to market to our go-to-market strategy, and it really kept us true to our strategic ambition and really what we want to achieve as a business. What we did as well is we had finance fully integrated into the process, so the decision making really was about the financial numbers, which actually as well simplified significantly our budgeting cycle. So it was kind of a non-event in a way that we just did a copy paste, and we knew it was challenging, but we had routes in order how to close that. It also, and this is very important to me, it also significantly impacted our engagement score, as people were on the one hand empowered, but then also took these ownership in order to close the gaps. And these gaps for leadership, what was great was that they were identified early on, so decisions could be taken or countermeasures could be taken whilst we had choices, and we knew that we had options in order to manage that. And what it did overall as a business is well, many of the performance measures had improved, but overall it moved our IMMS business really from a year-to-year decline in that market back to a sustainable growth. So that was, you know, the exciting elements, what an IBP process can do for you, and it helps the organization to work on one plan, one agenda, really. Would you mind moving the slide? Great. So what we want to cover here today really are the pitfalls of stalled IBP initiatives, as Kim said, and how to overcome them. And we're actually taking that between AIMMS and Oliver Wight, really from a people, process, and a tool perspective. So before we go into these, we would really like to do the a first poll and see who chairs your review. So you have the choices here, and you have a single choice to click on one of them. Is it, you know, the option, first option, some of the managers within the department that are within the process? Is it the executive leadership team really that owns the delivery of the strategic areas in their business? Is it supply chain? Are these data experts, so some of the people, the doers, the planners in the process? Or maybe you don't have an IBP process yet, which is perfectly fine. So then just click that option. I'm waiting here for Kim to see where we are at. Okay, so we have a bit of a mixed picture here. We have people on the line that don't have a process, or probably thinking about implementing that. So it's really important that you know, you look at these pitfalls as we're going. And I see quite a good number here. 10 of the people on the line really are having the leadership team here already in the role of the chairs of the review, so they're owning the process. So that is really, really good. Still a little bit of supply chain here, but then I'm assuming for the way forward is that many of the people on the line want to either understand how to really implement an IBP process, or then looking at how to engage further and get more benefits out of that. Great, so we move to the next slide. So the first pitfall really is not having the right players. So from the scoring here, I think it's not too big of a problem, but just really to emphasize for companies where IBP is the way we run the business, the CEO owns this in their organization, right? In my organization where I came from, Ian was our regional head. He really knew what the process could deliver, driving everybody to really get that output out of the process. So that was true leadership and ownership from a CEO level. Now the other reviews, as you see in you know, with the visual here, the other reviews are chaired by the owners of the strategy. So marketing owns usually the portfolio strategy, commercial owns the commercial strategy, the COO the supply strategy, and what that contribution is really. And we need to really pull the right players in here to drive decision making in order to deliver those strategy. if this is not the case, then decisions really are taken outside the process. And I see various companies that actually struggle with that, where it's not the way we run the business, but then it is a way where all information is pulled back in. So it is important really to drive that. Now, to overcome if they're not yet in the process and not really leading it, it really goes back to education and understanding. So they need to understand what's in it for them, what the process delivered to their worry circuits, and what is important for this process to manage for the company overall. And then again, what is their role to lead the change as well. So Brian, is that similar with your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Birgit. It is, and the chart that's on the screen there. So we carried out a recent survey of just over 300 sort of senior leaders and asked a series of questions, and I'll kind of reference that survey at several points in the webinar. But this question was kind of one of the first ones, and we wanted to understand, you know, who are the executive sponsors that are really committed to planning success within an organization. And here it was, you know, a very strong answer around its supply chain and operations that are driving this, which, you know, correlates slightly with the poll that we did. But I think, kind of reflecting on this, we're probably guilty at AIMMS as well. So we probably, you know, only target supply chain people with planning solutions, and I guess that's one of the kind of insights we've had from our partnership with Oliver Wight is actually we need to extend that reach beyond just supply chain operations and really engage with finance community, sales and marketing as well. So yeah, and I'd be curious, Birgit, what do you think the cause of this is? Why typically is it kind of supply chain and operations that dominate here?
In reality, they're at the end of the chain, right? So they have to deliver, even though they didn't have information, direction, and decisions up front necessarily. So many of the journeys we're on actually start by the supply chain. And I see many companies where we're having first touch points that it is even run from a supply chain perspective, right? So other functions would not necessarily see the benefits, but it is, but they're doing, if they're contributing, they're doing it for supplier because they keep asking. So important is really that a change curve, taking leaders through that and really address that they understand what's the benefit, what the process delivers to them, but then also how important it is to really link, connect the dots and link that all together. So this is from an outside in view, and we can, you know, see this and point this out, but then it's also education of best practice that does help really engage leaders, because many leaders really look, what is the ambition, what is the potential, and as that really to address their worry circuits as well. So Kim, I don't know if there were any questions on this pitfall.
Yeah, there's a question that came in from Linda, and she's asking, can we still run IBP just as a supply chain organization?
Do you want to take this, Birgit? I mean, I guess I've kind of shared that, you know, our experience is, yeah, typically we're engaging with supply chain people, and I suppose from an S&OP point of view, that you know, that demand and supply balancing, it's kind of naturally sat with supply chain. Is it possible to extend beyond that just within the four walls of supply chain, or it is, you know, does that not work?
You can only get to a certain level, right? And the key element is you will not have the insights from a portfolio strategy, from a pricing strategy, from you know, what we're doing with our go-to market approach. We will, from a supply chain perspective, never be able to really see all those insights. So all you can do and base your planning on is history, but you don't know what we're actively as an organization changing in that history. So it is very difficult. You will never reach that big picture sustainable level if you keep that to the supply audience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this pitfall, or this answer here really is about getting the product and portfolio management as an own standalone step in the process. Traditionally, S&OP was focused on supply and demand balancing, and I often see weaknesses really in portfolio management and the big picture on what's our product and service offering in organizations. So companies do too much and do too many initiatives as well. They fail to launch on time. The time to market is not necessarily competitive, and the time to profitability in a similar way. And what we need, therefore, is a proper portfolio management step where we have the right focus and the consolidated view, really, to take the required decisions about that. And those decisions are around the resources, or then about what's the right portfolio for the future, what is the offering we're having, and really to drive that that business. So if I'm thinking back of my time when I was in running the IBP process within our organization, it's the portfolio management was very strong, and it has grown actually very strong. And through this through this integration, really we managed to look from a big picture differently at things. We looked at our segmentation, we looked at our project management, and it's really allowing that that helicopter view to take a step back and say, where are we doing too much? Are we delivering? And what is it that we really need? Again, back in link for strategy. Now, one of the issue I do see is that there's kind of a disconnect, and from a tool perspective, there's great tools for project management, but is that overall overarching view that that is sometimes missing. So, Brian, do you want to share anything of what the AIMMS IBP is offering here?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think from a planning solution point of view, and certainly my experience, lots of planning solutions kind of struggle to deal with this slightly more abstract data and an abstract way of looking at things that's required for this stage. Typically they've got master data coming from ERP systems, and here we can be talking about new products that are just at the idea stage or at the business plan stage, don't yet exist in master data. So we've been quite creative in how we've set the application up to allow you to work in that way, and kind of to avoid the pitfall of this just being absorbed into the demand planning step. We've split it out as a completely separate step. So there's a project management step, and there you can create new products. You can manage the various stages in the funnel, which is what we're looking at on this screenshot, and really get that helicopter view you were talking about, to say, yeah, where are all of my projects? Which ones am I behind on? Which ones am I ahead on? Given the success percentage, I think, of moving from one stage to the next stage, what does my weighted revenue, volume, margin pipeline look like for these new products? And I can carry that forward then into the demand review step. So really, we've broken it out as a separate step to give it visibility and make sure it happens as a separate step, and enable that capability to create products that don't yet exist in master data and are just part of our product funnel. So Kim, any questions coming through on this section? Just conscious of where we are time-wise.
Yeah, we did get a question. Let's cover that, and for all the other people, feel free to send in your questions, and if we don't have time to get through the questions today, we will get back to you in a one-on-one follow-up. So please keep sending in your questions. John is asking, you see, we are planning to cover portfolio in the demand strip as these people are the same. Did you see that work in other organizations?
We often do get that that challenge on, you know, it's similar people. It's not necessarily all the same, but similar people in both reviews. It's actually have been doing a health check within an organization that did merge that, and they came to the conclusion as well it was not a good idea, and it was drawing them back, because in the end you're trying to solve all in one. But we really need to look at do we really have the right offering to be competitive in that marketplace, and how are we progressing that and moving that forward really to success, and then look at more the marketplace, our customers, our way to reach these customers, and so our go-to-market approach here. To really separate that out. So it's a big mistake in my view and in my experience if companies try to do two in one, to actually only look at, you know, only look at the revenue outcome, but missing against competition on really the portfolio.
Yeah, thanks Birgit. Let's move on to number 3.
So another pitfall I see is the ownership of demand. So in reality, demand is at the heart of the process or the business really. And this is where actually the revenue is generated, isn't it? So it's crucial to get the ownership right. Demand needs to be owned by sales and marketing as they influence really the actual demand to be directed to your company versus competition, through the activities that you're doing in sales and that you're doing in marketing. So what we see a lot is that, you know, some demand numbers were created from a supply chain perspective at the startup, or the demand planner, because there's more data affinity in a way. Demand planner is sitting in supply chain. So and sales and marketing really are involved in the process more. You're not actively engaged really, but more for giving numbers to supply, as I mentioned earlier. So it is very important that sales and marketing really, on the one hand, understand what the process delivers for them. So really understanding how best they use their resources, how they're meeting their commercial strategy by doing that, and it often is, it's not really understood that this is the process that gives them the visibility of where they will end up. Will they meet their budget? Will they meet their targets? Will they get the bonus in the end as well? The other element really is about not showing the truth, right? So it is very important that within a good IBP process, we have the truth as we know it, and our plans are not biased, so not one-sided. The background here is really, well, wrong behaviors all over. What we see sometimes, it's, you know, people are holding back telling everything because they don't know yet. Once they show it, you know, finance might grab that, or they will be held accountable to deliver, even though they say it's only, you know, it's only on the horizon. It is a potential or an opportunity that we could do that. So they don't show it until they know, which is then again too late from the rest of for the rest of the organization to respond in an effective way. And then on the other hand, in order to be able to be supplied, what we would see sales and marketing would sometimes deliver you know, biased numbers exceeding the expectation to supply, just in case, and just to make sure that we are getting supplied, which is then again putting pressure on the organization overall. So I don't know, Brian, you want to exploit what your experience is here?
Yeah, and I certainly with our with AIMMS customers, the demand planning is definitely something that kind of sits in supply chain. It's something supply chain do, and sales and marketing reluctantly participate in. And you know, I was having a discussion with a customer earlier in the week, where they were saying, you know, we really just need to find a way to engage the sales team to participate in this process. And I think the challenge that we see is supply chain kind of want certainty from a demand plan, and that certainty is not something that the sales team can give or feel comfortable giving. And this is really where I like the Oliver Wight approach of using vulnerabilities and opportunities to kind of uncover that uncertainty. And you know, it doesn't make it go away, but it now makes it visible and allows us to plan, and really allows us to create some powerful scenarios. And so this is what we've built into the tool. So the page, the screenshot you're looking at here, shows how we can create multiple different demand scenarios that we want to evaluate from a supply perspective, and build up that scenario by adding in various vulnerabilities and opportunities. So we understand what our base plan is, and then we can apply to that vulnerabilities where we feel that plan is exposed and we need to take some mitigating action, or opportunities where we think there's a chance to go beyond it, and see how that brings us towards our target. And for me, it's a fantastic way now to break out those uncertainty elements, capture them, and hopefully allow the sales team to more actively participate in the process. So Birgit, I don't know if you want to kind of quickly sort of sum up why vulnerabilities and opportunities are so important and where they bring value to the process.
Well, I think you covered that, but in reality, it is the way how we enable the truth as we know it. Once you have clearly defined the principle of what is a vulnerability and what is an opportunity and how you manage them, we have that one set of numbers, which we call the most likely outcome or the truth. And then through the vulnerabilities, opportunities can make it transparent to all the other steps. So there's some in product, there's some in demand, there's some in supply as well. To really make it transparent so others can look at them and see what impact that has and how to manage them. Key is that we have this transparency enabled here, but then also that they're actively owned and managed really, because those are the levers in the end to close the gap that we have to our strategic ambition, and we want to keep the finger on the pulse really here. So Kim, I don't know if we have time for questions. Is there anything urgent?
Yeah, no questions on this pitfall. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Okay, well let's roll into another poll quickly. So we've kind of hinted at already that this IBP requires more than just supply chain. So we're curious as to how well integrated is finance into your process. So there's 5 options there, which would kind of start from there's no financial numbers whatsoever in the process. Finance attend the meetings, but they prepare their own set of numbers outside the process, right the way through to it's fully integrated and we all work to a seamless and rolling budget. So going to be curious to see what the result is here. Just give everyone a chance to click an answer. Right, so it seems like the trend here is more towards finance not being particularly involved in the process. So just over a quarter where there's no financial numbers used in the process at all. Then 37%, which I must admit kind of resonates with a lot of my experience, where finance attend the meetings, but then, you know, prepare their own numbers outside the process, and very, very few yet that actually have got a fully integrated process. So that's really quite an interesting result, and brings us nicely to our fourth pitfall. So Birgit, back to you.
Yeah, I guess, as you said, finance needs to be really fully integrated into the process. All functions are key and all are involved, because we're taking decisions over the 36 months forward-looking horizon, and we need to look at that from all the angles. Finance is kind of pointed out for one reason, because in the end, decisions and the best decision and best choice for the organization in the end comes back to money, and that it could be resources, but again, that is, you know, investment into people that are related really here to that. So going into organizations that have a process, but it's not yet fully effective, is what I see there is then that the financial cycle are really separate. So it's more, you know, in reality, the information that finance needs for the budgeting cycle, or even for financial forward planning, is coming from the same stakeholders, or should be coming from the same stakeholders. So in reality, once there is an understanding of what we're doing with the process, and finance really understands the role that they can and will play here, my experience is they love the IBP as soon as they really understand the potential, and it makes them, it provides them actually with a seat at the table for decision making. It helps them be able to challenge and challenge assumptions that are behind, to really drive that understanding and drive the truth in the plan as well, and really play an important role, really become the co-pilot of the organization. So finance does love the process once they're in it, but challenging often, Brian, is what I see is that, you know, they're separate tools, and it's not easy necessarily to financialize everything that is in on a volume base in the forward-looking 36 months horizon, where prices might change, where, you know, our cost might change. So businesses actually have that challenge. That challenge on tools. So Brian, do you want to take that?
Yeah, and I think there's two things here that we see, and I'll probably focus on the, you know, where you said once finance understand IBP, they really love it and engage it, and it's certainly something we've seen. You know, they don't want to look at SKU level detail. They don't want to know, yeah, you know, SKU X is up by 2% or whatever. So the, you know, a good tool has got to be able to aggregate to an appropriate and meaningful level for the finance guys. But where we find we really get them hooked is with scenarios, because they want to understand, you know, as well as this is the plan, actually what's the possible range either side of that, and what are the levers we've got to pull to be able to influence revenue, margin, service, and you know, one of the demos we'll typically do when we can get finance people to the table is to look at, you know, okay, here's one scenario where we optimize with just give us the best service for everyone. What does that look like? Now, if we make some strategic choices and choose to prioritize a particular customer segment over another, what impact does that have on our financials, and how might that influence the choices we choose to make? And I put one of our survey results up here as well, which really tried to explore and understand, you know, how many organizations actually are looking at those type of scenarios and are able to answer those type of questions. So we approached it from a service level point of view and asked, you know, what service level do you try to attain? And pretty much half the respondents, it's, yeah, well, it's a one size fits all. We just want great service for everyone. And actually, you know, that doesn't really excite finance people, when you start to show them, well, you can explore scenarios now where, you know, you can look at prioritizing different customers, and, you know, those that deliver greater margin, you may choose a different approach on. And that really is really where we find we get them hooked and excited, and they want to engage in the process now. Because I think, as you said, Birgit, they want to understand what are the levers they've got to pull. When they do those, what effect does it have? But that's got to be presented at an appropriate level, which is not SKU level detail. So Kim, I don't know if we've got any questions on this section, or whether it makes sense to, given where we are time-wise, move straight on to the next one.
Yeah, I suggest we move on at this point, and I'll try to group some similar questions at the end.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So pitfall number 5 is around assumptions, and it's certainly something we've noticed at AIMMS. So Oliver Wight, from an IBP process point of view, is really focused on assumptions, and I think, you know, our previous tools, you know, similar to lots of those out on the market, really concentrate on you know, the analytics and the optimization side of things, and you know, assumptions hasn't really come into play, or that's something you manage offline in an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document. So we've put a lot of effort, seeing how much value Oliver Wight place on assumptions. We put a lot of effort into enabling the user to capture assumptions right the way throughout the process, and for those to carry through. So if you're part of the exec team reviewing the final plans, at the end of the process, you can see all of the underpinning assumptions that are related to that plan, as well as actions and who's responsible for those, and are they ahead or behind. And it's been quite eye-opening to us to kind of realize that, yeah, actually this kind of process management element of the assumptions is really quite important to running a successful IBP process. So Birgit, perhaps you'd like to expand on kind of why Oliver Wight places such a high value in assumptions throughout the process.
So indeed, assumptions are very important, as you say, Brian, and you know, for us they underpin and explain the thinking behind the numbers, really. So if I just take the current example of COVID, right? Everybody on this line, on this call, I mean, even Brian and I, will have different views of, you know, when is it over? How long is it going to last? What is going to be the impact now, but in longer term on our business? And what's the new, right? Because the business will change in a way. We will go back when they have found a vaccine, etc. So what is important is that we have this crucial conversation within the cross-functional team to see the different perspectives. And this again is back to finance, a very, very good player in challenging these assumptions, really driving a consensus view of the organization. What do we want to plan for it? What do we think as a common view, what is going to happen, and what are we building for? And then as we go, really understand and learn from that, if things have gone different or if things have gone that way, but then adapt. So what it is important to then find these crucial assumptions that really drive the needle, and they're in every step of the process, really. And there's ownership at different levels as well. But what many are struggling really is, as you say, Brian, it's how to capture them. I mostly see spreadsheets on that, as we want to see the evolution over time, you know, spelling what we think is going to happen out over the forward-looking 36 months, really. And then we want to track them, we want to follow them, we want to have owners behind them as well. Now, crucial, just, you know, as a recommendation from my side, is to slim it down to what are the key ones. People have a tendency to capture too much, but the question is which ones are the ones that move the needle and really have an impact on our business, our demand, our marketplace that is driving us. And what I like about AIMMS is not only the way to capture them and show them in the way that we would want to see them, but also what you do is have these models behind and this ability to really use that in the learning tools in a way to then model impact and effect. So throw out what doesn't have a correlation, but then also use the ones where we have a correlation and move them going forward really from assumptions into parameters. So I don't know, Kim, are there any questions or Brian, any comment to that?
No, that was a great summary.
Yeah, looks like for our listeners it's all clear.
Excellent. Right, so I think you're up with another poll, Birgit.
Yes. So the question here is, what's the main focus of the reviews that we're having? And if we have the choices coming up now, really is it short-term volume related, so the next couple of months really? Is it this year's volume and the business plan that we're having? Are we looking medium to long term already and looking at a strategy and how to deliver our strategy, and are we having a rolling time horizon really with the focus of deploying our strategy for a minimum of 24 months? Most companies have moved on actually to a 36 months forward-looking horizon here. So if you could have your choice here on those, that would be very helpful. Okay, so I'm not surprised by that. That's actually pretty much in line, maybe not the full numbers, but very much in line with what we've seen before and what we've seen, outside this webinar. I guess the lower one, the 24% really looking at deploying strategy, are the ones on the line that already had the CEO chairing it up and really driving IBP to what it should be, and really looking for decision making in that direction. But where I'm not surprised to see the majority of the people on the line really looking at this year's volume and the business plan. So if we move on, one of the pitfalls we see and the causes for that, really for looking shorter term, is that people are working usually in too much detail. So in order to really look further out in their time horizon, you need to go at a different altitude, right? You need to fly kind of higher. So we promote the principle of being roughly right versus precisely wrong. And more importantly, if sales and marketing really should own the numbers, then you need to speak at their level and what is relevant for them as well, which is not necessarily the SKU level over that time horizon, really, isn't it? So we need to be able to translate the insights we have from customers, from consumers, from the market into numbers, and find the right level of aggregation or altitude really that we want to play at. So we actually in our workshops often do a game. So especially on demand management, we're playing a game and really helping people to understand and realize that you're actually more accurate when you're flying at a different height and you're looking at a more aggregated view. So if that is the more the market side of it, then even for supply, they would not want to see everything in detail, even though sometimes they're actually voicing that and say they would. In reality, also supply is aggregating it up to material groups that they need to purchase, to production families. So 36 months out, what we need to find is what is the level of detail on the components or the processes that we need, and what do we really need to know, and when actually do we need to go further in detail over time horizon, or if things are moving closer to the here and now. So sometimes what I hear is the tool forces us to, or the tool has the possibility, so why not really doing that? But in reality, as an organization, we need to decide what level do we want to plan at, and what level do we want to review our business and take the decisions that we have that we need, and then what's the time the point in time when we need to drill that out into the depth that we require in order to really execute to that plan. So Brian, this is indeed where AIMMS is offering that flexibility. Do you want to explain how that works in reality?
Yeah, I'll try to. So and I think this is a key feature of how our application is built. So the data model that sits behind it has got very flexible hierarchy structure, so we can have multiple hierarchies which enable us to work at different levels, so the appropriate level for each of those steps. So as you've just talked about, Birgit, and as your pyramid here demonstrates, in the demand review step, we may want to work at one level of aggregation that's meaningful to the sales team, but then in supply review, that sales orientated hierarchy might be completely irrelevant to us from a supply point of view, and we need a different hierarchy. And really what the tool does very, very well is enable you to work at whatever is the appropriate level of aggregation for each step that gives you meaningful information without getting bogged down in too much detail. The detail is there underneath, and that's how everything is linked together and built up. But from a planning perspective, and how do I work with the numbers and how can I visualize them, that's moved up to a more aggregate level that's meaningful to that particular stage in the process and to that particular organization. And I think just to stay on the point a bit more as well, the flexibility we have as well is when you implement the tool, then on day one you don't need to finalize your decisions on what hierarchy structure you want. We've got the capability to for the users to actually modify that hierarchy structure as their process matures, as they mature using the tool and realize, well, we don't want to work at production subfamily, we actually want to work at production family. That's more meaningful to us. So they can make those changes. So there's a lot of flexibility there to grow and develop as the process grows and develops. And I guess just to kind of round off, because we sort of see a lot of still a lot of organizations want, as you said, Birgit, because the detail's there, they want to work in the detail because there's some perceived accuracy from working at that lower level. And I put another one of our survey results up here where we asked the question, what level of accuracy do you work at? And to be honest, I was quite pleasantly surprised here by the result, because actually, over half, so it does seem to be that message is starting to get through, that when you're looking at a longer term horizon, your accuracy only needs to be, good enough, you're roughly right, to use your expression, rather than, precisely wrong or down in that detail that you would use for short-term planning. So Kim, I don't know if there's any great questions come through on this one before we move on to the final one.
Yeah, before we move on, let's if you could reply to a comment from Kenneth, who is saying, I thought the level of detail were defined by what decisions the forecast should support.
Yeah, well, maybe if I start on that, and then Birgit can.
And maybe if you could, because I also got some comments that the questions are sometimes not good to hear. So if you could repeat the comment and go from there. Thanks.
Okay, yeah. So the question here is about, aren't the levels defined by the level that the forecast detail is at? and again, here, I think it's, you know, if you look at that pyramid, so if I take, you know, our solution, you know, an input into the demand review step is, you know, what's your starting statistical forecast? So that, you know, can come from our tool or from another tool. That's probably going to be, you know, at customer SKU location level of detail. You're building, you know, what's the best statistical model given that history, and that's coming in at a very low level. As long as you've got your hierarchy structure correct, that can be aggregated up then to be reviewed by the sales and marketing teams at that, you know, as in the diagram here, subfamily level or marketing family level. You can make some changes there and then disaggregate those changes back down to the lower level again. So I don't think you need to be necessarily restricted by what's my starting level of my forecast if you structure your hierarchy well. Birgit, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I mean, there's many points, and maybe we're going back on an email as well. But I tell you, I mean, to your point, Brian, if even in statistical forecasting, right, on a single SKU, I have less data points and history, and than I have if I use a group of products, and I'm actually even, you know, replacing one by one. In our case, you know, one flavor by the other. It's still a similar demand and a similar you know, exposure in the marketplace as well. So it is more accurate, and you have the right data points in that way. Now, key is as an organization that you understand what is really required in order to drive the decisions. And in reality, to your question, Kenneth, it could be that this is, you know, this is on a specific product and a specific launch, and it could be on an SKU level, but it is probably rather exceptionally, because most of the time it is about the direction, you know, the offering that we have. So a group of products or services that we're offering in that market space, or with this group of customers, or in that channel. So key is that you're having that conversation internally and really help guiding through what do we really need versus what do we think we need or what others would need.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Birgit. Okay, well, let's move on to the final pitfall. So back to you, Birgit.
Yeah, so the final one is actually related to the poll and how long we are looking out really as well. It's if we have strategy as our radar and really where we want to drive to, it is actually helping to have take the right decisions at the right level and over the right horizon. Now, what I see in companies, you know, having the outlook and the numbers that they have, but then often it's more the information sharing, or they're actually focused on the budget, as we saw in the just the last poll that we had. So a strategy now brings this important angle and the direction or that radar in that is required for the true decision taking in IBP sense, right? So companies, they might deliver their volume growth, but maybe that is on the wrong portfolio, or it is at the right, you know, it's not in line with the pricing strategy. You know, it might not be fully at profitability, and might not, you know, even address our strategic customers. So it's that lens and that big picture view again that we need to and that strategy is delivering us to really look at what is are we exploiting the potential. Strategy was set really for a reason. Now, are we staying true to it, and are we really delivering that as an organization? So it's unfortunately, as you see in that statistics here, is only 25% of the organization have that regular drumbeat that actually looks at, are we on track in deploying that, and do we take the decisions while we now have choices in order to really deliver our strategy, or are we just, you know, happy we're making our numbers and we're making our budget? So it is it's one of the key elements really to drive you moving forward. And I see that, you know, day in, day out with companies. Once they get that right, they come to true decision making, really. Now, this is where tools can help in visualizing that, because we look at strategy in each step of the process. But then, you know, in the end, for the management team, we do want to bring that together as well. So, Brian, do you want to explain what the possibilities are here?
Yeah, and this waterfall chart here, which is something again we were introduced to by Oliver Wight as a very visual way to tell that story, really, of how do we get you know, from our current base, how do we build up to getting towards our strategic plan, and actually, do we get there, or is there still some gap, and what does that tell us? And I think it's such an elegantly simple chart, but so powerful as well. So we actually use this throughout the tool. So there's a version at the end of demand review, so that the demand review team can see what their current demand plan looks like relative to the target, right the way through to the end of the process, where we would see, you know, a chart like the one we're looking at here, where we can see as well what was our previous plan from the last planning cycle, where's our new base starting from, the various vulnerabilities and opportunities we've got, how do they build on that base and compare to our target, to our strategic plan, and then also we can see, once we've run the supply plan, if we've got constraints from a supply point of view, actually what's my constrained result. So I can see, here's what, you know, the art of the possible is from the demand team. Actually, our supply constraints mean we can only deliver, you know, this much of that plan, all in a really easy to understand and interpret chart. And certainly when we've the kind of sharing we've done with the Oliver Wight team, the feedback we get on this chart and the use of it has been really positive to date. So very simple chart, but I think hugely powerful in terms of how it tells that story at the appropriate level. So I'm going to actually probably upset Kim and not even ask for any questions at this stage, looking at the time. So I think I will quickly sum up and then return to Kim for any final questions. So this final slide here hopefully brings together what Birgit and I have kind of talked about for the last hour, that really, you know, IBP is about three key pillars: people, process, and technology. And you know, you need all three of those, and that really is why, you know, we're both quite excited about cooperating together, because Oliver Wight bring the people and process side of things, you know, engaging the leadership, coming up with the right process that's appropriate for your business, their Class A you know, standards, and we bring to that party the technology solution that lets you, you know, get on top of the data, start taking advantage of scenarios, and really leverage you know, analytical capabilities of a powerful and flexible tool. And that, you know, that hopefully, you know, sums up what we've talked about for the last hour, and where that's heading is kind of a joint offering from Oliver Wight and AIMMS, something we call Fast Track IBP, which is the education, the advisory, the change aspects for people and process, combined with technology that can be deployed, you know, quickly and flexibly. And we'll announce more on this on the 7th of July next week. So it's a bit of a race through those last few slides, but I think that, you know, the important content has been from the discussions. So Kim, I'll pass back to you to just deal with any final questions and close us down.
Yeah, I'd like to invite everyone. Thank you, Brian. Please keep sending in your question. To also respect time today, I suggest we'll come back to you in an email to make sure that your answer gets to you, and that we don't run out of time too long today. Yeah, so with that being said, please keep sending in your questions if you have any, and that lets me to thank Brian and Birgit. Thank you a lot for sending in all your knowledge today, and for our audience, we will be sending out the recording within the next week, and in the meantime, feel free to check both of the Oliver Wight and the AIMMS website for any useful resources, and you can also ask questions that come up maybe after this webinar to aims@oliverwight.com. Yeah, I'd like to invite you to right after this webinar fill in a survey. We would really appreciate that if you could take a minute and provide us with some feedback for continuous improvements. Thanks again for joining us today. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Birgit. I wish everyone a very nice day, and I'll hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kim. Same for us.
Thanks all.